Issue 71. Oh, the missing backup stories at the start of the issue again. It starts with Tails flying to the outskirts of the city with Amy while worried about being on the bad side of town. And Amy reassures him because she's been there with Elsie before and been fine. They go to the library Amy found earlier, and Amy is suddenly able to recognize the person in the library last time as if she got the chance to meet him, even though she didn't. This person, Jeremiah, had been working to preserve the collected body of work by his grandpa, which is why Robotnik hadn't been able to destroy them. So, was he hiding here the whole time, even when Robotnik was in power? Tails is happy about hearing about his relation to that writer because he liked those stories too. It's a history of our people, what's with the emphasis on our there. If the writer, Kirby, so he's the pink puffball himself, I guess. If the writer was a storyteller, why did he write a factual, historical account too? And I thought all historical records were destroyed centuries ago from Days of Fury. That's what Ixis' pointless origin story said. At first the story seems to be about as vague and summarizing and no shit as you'd expect of it considering it has no real historical records left to go off of. Finally, some new information. The status quo remained until a visionary named Alexander noticed the efforts of another culture and decided that everyone would benefit from the pooling of knowledge, and set about recruiting others who shared in his dream. The Echidnas were at least sympathetic, but thought that the knowledge they provided would do more harm than good. AKA, they don't trust non-Echidnas to not kill everyone with science because they're racist. The Overlanders were too hostile to risk incorporating into Alexander's new society. Then we see the building of Mobotropolis, even though we weren't told about a time skip, but we were just in the caveman days. So either the city is way older than I thought, or the caveman days were just a few hundred years ago. And somehow I don't think that's the case. Either that or the caveman days immediately progressed to the Industrial Revolution that fast just from the pooling of knowledge so that Mobotropolis could be built that early. Mobotropolis was the world's first multicultural society, another thing that makes it special. And Alexander was made the leader because he was thoughtful and benevolent. However, the story is cut short as we are led to the main story, well, after going through a bunch of worthless page space wasting advertisements and stuff. Seriously, why are pages like this here? They weren't there in the earlier issues. Sonic's eyes are finally green now? He's got his modern design finally. And it takes until the third text bubble for Sonic to say that he's going to recap how that happened. Because it took so long for him to say that, I actually checked my timeline again when I first saw this panel to see if I missed a story. Comic book stories should never start out after the story is ended because it just makes you have a knee-jerk reaction that you might have missed an issue. Not to mention we have Sally spoiling the main plot points of the whole story. Really, this whole panel should have been cut out. We go to a panel with text saying 20 minutes earlier, and explaining that in the Valley of Knothole Village, an impenetrable blanket of energy had suddenly engulfed the whole area a while ago, only to vanish. And Nate says happily among cheering people in the city that his theory was correct. The Super Emerald, which I'm glad they're actually using in the plot after it was introduced, heightened Sonic's speed enough so that he would be able to attract the beam away from Knothole by manipulating time itself, saving the whole world from doom. So basically, it sounds like he hold out a bullshit power, letting him somehow manipulate time so that Knothole was no longer 3 hours ahead in time. A plot point that was never actually used for anything, and just caused people to remind you that it had happened. Well, I guess I can accept Sonic manipulating time as long as he has a Super Emerald. Chaos Emeralds do control time and space after all, and we've seen them stop time in SN2. Why was Sally woozy? Then we cut to 40 minutes earlier. I really hate this confusing story format, especially since it has no tension about whether everything will work out as expected in the end, because you start out at the end. So it's just about finding out what the hell's going on. Sonic is wearing goggles for some reason. It's weird. Something weird about him wearing goggles is that normally Sonic's eyes are connected to each other, so it's more like he has 2 eyeballs but 1 eye. But whenever he's wearing goggles, it looks like his eyes are separated somehow. But yeah, Sonic's wearing goggles as well as dressed up in a weird red outfit, both for no reason, with the Super Emerald strapped to his back because I guess they don't trust him to be able to hold onto it with his hand. If the logic for him wearing goggles is that something like a fly might get sent to his eyes while he's running, shouldn't he be wearing goggles all the time? Because he always runs really fast. And yet he has the reflexes to avoid running into stuff and things don't fly into his eyes constantly. So these goggles seem very unnecessary. I guess it's only for a visual indicator that they're trying to emphasize the fact that he's going to be running for a long time, but Sonic always runs for a long time. For some reason, just having one Super Emerald transforms Sonic into Super Sonic. Well, the comic is an alternate universe with different rules, so I can easily accept that the Super Emeralds of this universe have each emerald being just as powerful as 7 Chaos Emeralds. But it must be even more powerful than that since he didn't have 50 rings for the transformation earlier. Unless he did and we were supposed to just assume that. So Sonic runs across the entire world, presumably using his ability to run across the oceans as well, and for some reason, he transforms into Ultra Sonic as well. Okay, I have a big problem with this because it was already established that to turn into this particular form, he needs to have like 1,000 rings or something. And they made a big deal of the fact that 1,000 rings were in one place at once. It was never firmly established, well, maybe it was 1,000 rings. It's never really firmly established how many he has to have. So I guess we're just supposed to assume that he collected that many rings from running around the world. Okay, actually that does make sense. But I still think it's weird that he's back to being blue as if he's not invincible when this is a more powerful form. Maybe the Supersonic form is insecure and thinks it needs to make it more obvious that it's a super form, so it turns people gold. But where's the Hypersonic form in all this? Once Sonic ran past Monkey Kong's home to the superheated stretch of the Great Desert, for some reason he transforms again, and at this point logic is completely thrown out the window as this new incarnation gives way to others depending upon Sonic's geographic location on the planet. Wow, Chaos Energy is just doing things for absolutely no reason on a whim at this point, because there's no reason for any of these useless transformations to take place. So many good, intriguing superform ideas completely wasted. Like Polar Sonic. Sonic could have turned into that with a magical artifact from the Southern Tundra, and he could have had ice powers from it. Although Ultra Sonic already had ice powers, though that would make it a natural transformation from Ultra Sonic then. And Eco Sonic. Eco Sonic makes his way through the leafy terrain of the Great Rainforest. Does he have planet controlling powers? He could have had this super form from another magical artifact instead of this form being totally arbitrary and wasted. It's not a big deal, it doesn't ruin the comic or anything, but it's just annoying missed potential that these two super forms show up for no reason and then vanish. Sonic was racing along with the planet's rotation, but unlike when he raced all over Anti-Mobius with his evil twin, this time he has a Super Emerald with him, which is what causes time itself in the Prime Zone to move forward at a far greater rate, just like Nate somehow predicted. Elias then points out to the king that the time beam is moving away from Knothole. Sonic, followed by after images of himself that don't translate well to comic form because it just looks like he has a bunch of clones, thinks about how he somehow got the inanimate time beam to decide to follow him. It better be made of chaos energy and thus be able to decide to do that with sentience, but even then, why is it following him? Curiosity? We cut to 30 minutes earlier, where Nate says that the time beam, which was making time flow backwards in Knothole and targeted it because of its mystical 3-hour time zone, is forcing Knothole to return to its proper place within the time stream. But if the beam is still directed at the area once it's realigned, time on Mobius will start to move both backwards and forwards at the same time. This will probably cause the equivalent of a game crashing or a blue screen of death as time gets totally confused, and as he puts it, it would destroy not only the fabric of time, but the entire planet as well. The plan is to draw the beam away from Knothole at the precise moment of realignment by giving it a more attractive target. Okay, Knothole was targeted because of his time shenanigans. What about Sonic and all the super forms is time related? He'll have a lot of magic in him, but that's it. Nathan reveals that he has one of the few super emeralds left on the globe, creating the intriguing hint that there used to be a lot more of them. Maybe the rest were all destroyed in a great war over them. Then we cut back to 10 minutes earlier, where Sonic is shivering, telling Sally that the two of them broke through a barrier, only to notice she's gone, and remember that while he used his super speed to escape Knothole, Sally was somehow left behind while he's left staring at a magical yellow light coming out of the Knothole Great Oak stump. What, did he not carry Sally with him? Sonic decides not to jump into the stump because its light is 3 times brighter than when he traveled through it earlier, and he doesn't want to get blinded by its light. I mean, he should have said that I just came from there, so why would I jump back in? This caused him to run for help. We then cut back to 8 minutes earlier, where Sonic points out to Sally that everything in Knothole is looking weird, and the reason they said this was because everything was moving backwards in it. Uncle Chuck not only walked backwards away from them, but couldn't hear his name being called out. The leaves are falling up, and Sonic's parents are speaking to each other backwards, forcing me to spend a while trying to read it backwards, starting from the bottom of the text bubbles. Sonic's mother was wondering where Sonic was because he had been avoiding his parents for weeks for some reason. And Jules, oh, it's actually Jules saying that, as it's Sonic's mother who reassures him. This is why their designs suck. I couldn't tell which was which, especially with them both being done in the same color out of laziness. Sonic asks what's with those strange glow around him and Sally, and Sally, being the smarter one, is the one who figures out the time is moving in reverse around them. Sally, which confused me at first, says that time moving backwards in Knothole might allow it to finally go back to being at the same time as the rest of the universe. But then Sonic asks what will happen after everything's moved past the 3-hour mark, which allowed me to understand why the hell Sally thought time moving backwards wasn't so bad. Sally says that this glow around them is what's been keeping them from interacting with anything in Knothole since they're outside of time. So the only way to fix everything is to escape the village. And she says this while the two are holding hands for literally the first time in the series as far as we know, but with neither of them actually reacting to it at all. What amazing romantic chemistry! They're totally more than friends. Sonic realizes that the Great Oak Slide is part of the past too, meaning that they can't touch it at all, trapping them. Sonic explains that he could use his super speed to vibrate the molecules in his and Sally's bodies to maybe pass through the barrier and get out of here, saying he read it in a comic book when he was little. Somehow he's able to vibrate Sally's body just as well as his, and also the two of them are holding hands again for the second time in the series, and the only reason they're doing this is so that Sonic can bring Sally with them out of Knothole, making me really question how she could have possibly got separated from them then. The vibrating molecules thing I think can be explained as an extension of Sonic's bullshit intangibility power that let him escape from Robotnik's cape in the 3D Blast special. But again, how is he doing this to Sally? It's never been established that Sonic's able to turn just about anything he's holding intangible. I mean, if he could, he would have taken advantage of that power a lot more. Ridiculous powers like this make sense if he had a Chaos Emerald, but he doesn't. So they're inconsistent with his established abilities, and if anything can happen, it's hard to care what does. We then cut to 10 minutes earlier where Sonic and Sally are using the Great Oak Slide, which has turned into a tunnel of blinding white light. You mean yellow light, Sonic. Sally wonders if it has some connection with that burst of light she saw earlier with him, and unfortunately trails off on her train of thought to tell Sonic in a panic that she's being pulled away from him and can't slow herself down. Sonic then grabs her hand after some struggling, and we cut to 7 minutes earlier, where Sally is pointlessly doing recap for us. Wait, Kodo stole the plane? I thought it was Crocbot. Sure, his remains were all that was left of him, but considering how many times he stayed functioning in spite of that, and my not being able to see Kodos in the plane at all, it was only natural I'd be misled. Sally then reassures Sonic that she's seen her father angry before and that wasn't it, so he's probably proud of what Sonic and Elise didn't know how to show it because he disobeyed him, or too happy in general to stay miffed for long. It's then revealed that Sonic's parents have been worried about him during his whole trip against Ixis, and on his second night back in town, he just left all night without telling them. Why didn't he tell them anyways? I still haven't gotten this whole parent thing figured out yet. Are you serious? I thought he had parents for most of his life, and then Chuck adopted him for a little while. But Sonic's talking as if he's had them for the first time. He's having a hard time adjusting to having parents again. At least he's a good enough person to realize his mistake and promise that he'll make it up to them. Then a weird light comes from the entrance to Knothole that they decide to check out. 15 minutes earlier, we see a heartwarming hug between Nate and the King, being happy that he's safe. Aw, that's sweet. The King then scolds Elias for sneaking off on a dangerous mission because he's the crowned prince, even though Sally's a princess and she was allowed to do that tons of times. The real reason is probably that he just got him back when he thought that he had died and is terrified of losing him for real. Yep, and he confirms it right there. Although Sonic does tell him that if it weren't for Elias' reasoning, the whole mission would fail because of Jeffrey and Sonic's arguing. The King then looks mildly annoyed at Sonic's disobedience, fortunately being reasonable enough that this was the only reaction he had, while saying that it's his fault because Sonic showed up when he told him not to. Sally then says that Sonic's parents called all night asking where he was. That's sweet, they really do care. 59 minutes earlier, we see another satellite coming back online, and detecting temporal distortion on surface of planet Mobius below. With that, it's finally explained in a moment that was actually pretty epic in height that this was the cause of the time beam all along, as arbitrary as it was. I still want to know what they are though, and who's manning them, and how the person manning them could have possibly known that Sonic would be able to save the world after he endangered it like this. Also, the staff names are all written backwards, because gimmick. The first story was written by Carl Bollers. I'm glad they finally followed up on Amy finding that library, and we get to have Tails and Amy interact with each other for once, although nothing's really come of it so far in terms of character moments other than Tails also liking the same stories as her. It's there to serve as an explanation about what made Mobotropolis in the first place, but since it goes all the way back to the caveman days, I'm immediately wondering if the story is historically accurate in universe because it directly contradicts Ix's origin story, saying that all historical records were wiped out centuries ago. So it seems like the story was built on pure assumptions. I do like the origin for the city though, but it was totally unnecessary. The main story was by Ken Penders, and I get it, it's written in Rashomon style because it's a meta joke playing off the time and reverse aspect. But having it start out at the end and go to the beginning was still not fun to read. It was confusing and annoying. It is good that they care enough to give a proper explanation to why Sonic changed to his modern design so suddenly. Having all that chaos energy in him caused some leftover residue of that energy to stick with him permanently, leading to a mutation where his eyes were turned green like an emerald, making him looking much better. His spines were made longer because the energy made his hair grow faster, and his shoes got buckles on them because I guess Chaos Energy thought they needed a new look. I thought Sonic's shoes always had buckles on them. Well, whatever. The story had two big problems in it. One, the format, as there's no tension because you know the happy ending right from the start and everything's just about finding out what the hell's going on. So you're always frustrated and desperate for answers. And two, the arbitrary super forms that were totally wasted. I'm not one to throw a tantrum on these forms just existing, but it would have been better to have them be the result of specific magical artifacts instead of happening for no reason, and having their own special powers to them justify their existence. Instead, I'm left worried that Eco Sonic and Polar Sonic would just be wasted concepts that never even needed to be made. And the whole story, caused by the mysterious allies finally doing something, was made not only to justify Sonic's redesign, but also to return Knothole to his normal time. It really drives the point home how the only point of the 3 hours ahead plot was to justify this whole issue happening. Otherwise it felt like a cool but wasted concept. Knothole's at least still in a zone of its own, right? I'm guessing not, so that was pointless. So much for it being better hidden from potential enemies then, because it was only hidden during relative peacetime. I love seeing the detailed ways in which reverse time affected Knothole, like the little detail of the leaves rising up, but we spent way too little time in there. And of course, this concept would have been much more impactful if this was a TV show where we could actually see people moving backwards and even hear backwards music for the added atmosphere. Not as great in still images. This story wasn't horrible, of course. Sonic being able to do all this stuff with a super emerald makes perfect logical sense, but it was stressful and hard to follow because it didn't just detail events in chronological order.